Greetings, class. Your professor here. Coming into week 3, I just wanted to give you a little bit of guidance for some things that are coming up. First of all, just a few tips and encouragements. I really enjoyed seeing more interaction. As I've mentioned before, you get a lot of value out of this course when you really interact, post, and respond to posts. We learn from each other. I see a few of you are kind of on the fringes of that, so I just encourage you to not only post but also be responding to other posts and just interacting online. You'll get a lot of value out of the class when you do that. Another reminder, notice particularly this past week that on the question we're giving example about parental posts. Some of you didn't follow the instructions which said give a specific example. So I just encourage you to read the question over a few times, make sure that you have the idea. It's very important that you get to the level of taking an example, looking at it, and then going back to your text and seeing how things connect. Is this parental post, is it square with the science of psychology, or does it not square? That's really where you're going to get some depth of understanding. As in anything, taking what you learn here, applying it in your own life, applying it in the world, in your interactions with other people. Just another encouragement on due dates. I'm seeing most of you are getting things posted. I want to encourage you to check that you have indeed posted for everything. I really can't be necessarily chasing you down for things that you might be missing. So just check to see that you have posted things both for this week and for last week to everything that is due. You have those little check boxes that help you just remember that aspect as well. And now I want to just give you a little bit of guidance on, you have this paper essentially going to look at a major person in psychology. It's not a big assignment, but it's one I think that you'll find very interesting, especially if you choose a person whom you have interest in and kind of what they represent in psychology and kind of what their contribution is. I think that you'll enjoy it. So I want to give you just a few people that you might want to look at. Now, of course, coming into this class, virtually everyone has heard of Freud and his contribution. And, certainly if you really like to look at that topic, you're certainly welcome to. I think that there is a number of other contributors that aren't necessarily discussed a lot in your text so far because it is an intro text. But there are a few that really have a lot to share, particularly about positive approaches. As some of you came into the course, you noted that much of the understanding of psychology out there in the sort of popular culture is that it's for people who have problems. I think some of you use the word crazy people, and of course you come to see that that's only a small part of psychology. So a couple people that really have helped us to see what the contributions to psychology can be done in a positive way. So first one, Carl Rogers is very influential in psychology. He actually is the one who introduced us to the idea of unconditional positive regard. Unconditional positive regard. Does that sound like anything that you might remember from faith context? That sounds a lot like unconditional love or acceptance, and it's such a vital part of the work of a counselor and the work of a person in interacting with other. Unconditional positive regard. So Rogers is one who really helped to bring that into awareness. So that a key part of our relating as counselors, as peoples, is accepting people fully. And when we do that and embrace the part of the relationship that is healing in our interactions with others, has had a big influence on Christian counseling for sure. And so I encourage you to look at Carl Rogers. And I do have audio introductions to each of these, and if you choose them, pop me an email. I'd be glad to send that to you. Just gives you a little quick view of each person. Second one is Abraham Maslow, who you had a little bit of an introduction to in the first part of the text. Maslow, of course, is probably most familiar with the hierarchy of needs that he talks about. It's kind of a triangle of our needs, which starts with safety needs and goes all the way up to self-actualization. So another positively oriented psychologist that you might want to look at, Abraham Maslow. Now, some of you, perhaps you're interested in maybe looking at contributions of women in psychology. Anna Freud, who is the daughter of Sigmund Freud, is one who you may want to check out. She really helped us to understand what is called the mechanisms of defense. We have different defense mechanisms that we use, sometimes positively, and sometimes they hurt us. A few of those defenses, for instance, are repression, where we push things down, repress certain things. Of course, there's denial, one that you probably are all familiar with. Then projection. Looking at those mechanisms of defense, I think some of you might really benefit from that. These things are really an application to everyday life. Once you apply them, you'll start noticing, if you look yourself reflectively, maybe where you're using them, and then you might notice them in others, of course, too. Another woman psychologist, Karen Horney, and she has a lot of contributions as well that I think you might want to have a look at. Then Carl Jung, very fascinating figure, was kind of a contemporary of Freud, was on the later end of his life, and kind of broke away from Freud and broadened the view of the unconscious. Unconscious is kind of this fascinating aspect about psychology. We know that we're influenced by it quite a lot. And Jung took a look at this more deeply. He looked at this area called the archetypes. For instance, we have operating in our world what you would call the mother archetype, that aspect of our culture and that kind of runs across our society, the mother archetype. And he also looked at this area called the collective unconscious. How is it that we come into life with some basic ideas about aspects of life? And he believed that aspect was kind of this embedded culture that we come into life with, that we know things about how we interact in culture. And so he called that the collective unconscious. Another particular figure, one of my favorites in psychology, his name is Viktor Frankl. He is an Auschwitz survivor. He's a medical doctor who was living in the time where the Second World War happened, and he amazingly survived concentration camps. He was a Jewish man, and what he did was he turned the experience, the suffering of that experience, into an opportunity to help those around him who were dying. And he held within him a hope that he essentially said that the human has a will to meaning. We make meaning out of situations. So this is especially important in the area of suffering, how we can transform suffering into kind of a almost like a fuel to move us through life. And there's a lot of parallels there with our Christian faith. So that's Viktor Frankl. Victor is spelled with a K, Viktor, and then Frankl, Frank with an L on the end. So those are a few figures that you might want to look into. Of course, there's others that come up in the text. You're welcome to look at Piaget, what he contributed. Although, you've looked at that already, so I encourage you to step out and maybe look at a different figure. There's many out there that you may encounter, but these are just a few. And so just begin looking at that topic, and I think you will find it to be quite interesting. And as I said, I do have audio introductions to these characters to give you kind of a view, kind of a different way of taking information. Some of you may be visual learners. Some of you are auditory learners. It's good to hear things. And some of you may be kinesthetic learners. You're the kind of learners that kind of like to really you get your body involved, typing things out, doing an activity. And we're trying to kind of look at all those different ways of learning in the class here. So again, joy to be with you along in this journey, and best in the discussions and the interactions this week in week 3. God bless.